our first speaker for tonight. We've got Tereza, who's speaking to us on an introduction to elm-charts. So please join me in welcoming Tereza. Thank you, Tereza.
Thank you. Okay, that's cool. So yeah, my name is Tereza, and I'm going to be talking about elm-charts today, a package of which I am the author. So the agenda is I'm very, very briefly going to teach you to make basic charts in this library, but due to time concerns, I'm not going to get too much into it. Most of the information you can find online in the official docs, so that's why we're not diving into it too much. So I'm going to focus on doing some more advanced customizations and some basic interactivity. First, what is elm-charts? Well, it's a package for rendering charts, surprisingly, in SVG in particular. So, and it's in 100% Elm, so there's no like ports, or it's not like utilizing any other JS libraries underneath or anything. So yeah, one thing also to note is that it is not a package for statistics. So if you want to do different kinds of data manipulation and stuff, you need a separate package for that, and then you can draw your results in elm-charts if you like. So yeah, without further ado, let's do some basics. I have some examples set up. So here we have a basic bar chart example. So you can see already from the imports, it sort of mirrors the HTML API, meaning that, for example, here, most of the elements available in the library will have the structure of a list of attributes and a list of children where applicable. So here we have, we're setting up the container of our chart, and we're editing the width and the height of the chart and adding some margins, which is the space here in between the main chart area and the outside. Here we have the first couple of children elements, which are the axes and labels and ticks. You can change these to be of your particular styling, but I'm not gonna go into that right now as well. And of course, the heart of this chart is the bars. Again, they have a list of attributes which sort of change the overall relation between the bars. And then here we have two sets of bars. So the first bar here will take all the Y values of our list of data here. So that would be 10, 20, 30. Make these purple bars 10, 20, 30. And the second one will do the C values. So yeah, and then you can add attributes. So we can round corners, for example, or we can change the look of these bars. Yeah, you can also do things to change the individual looks based on the data, but you can look up all these things in here, which is the official examples page, elmcharts.org, where you can see all the attributes that you can use, and the same goes for all the access stuff. But they all have like the basic setup of like some attribute, and then you give it a number or something like that. So it's not that tricky. So we're gonna focus on some other things today. Similarly, with scatter charts and line charts, it's pretty much the same setup, and you can look it up in here as well. So I really recommend utilizing all these examples here, but we're going to focus on bar charts today. So yeah, and so we're going to move on to more advanced customizations. What I qualify as advanced is like up until now we've just like edited the styling of existing elements, but in this case we're adding new elements like these labels, for example, and in particular adding new elements in relation to existing elements. So yeah, these slides are practically useless. I'm just going to be looking at these examples. So here we basically have the same as our first chart here, except to the data I've added our own labels. So for each of these data points, I've added a label, and we'd like to show that underneath here. And I have these helpers where you can add bin labels, and a bin is a group of bars which is made from the same data point. So this is a bin, this is a bin, this is a bin. So if we add this one, it will show the label that we added here underneath here, and we moved it down a little bit. Similarly with bar labels, we can add labels to the top here. That is the default position for them. So if we move them down a little bit, and they use the Y value by default. Now, if we want to change the position a little more dramatically, the move down attribute just moves it down a certain amount of SVG units, but we can change the position entirely by using, for example, get center. And so we can put them, now they're in the middle of the center. Now you might have noticed that I used a different import here, which is the module chart.item, and this is where we get to the fun part. So if we look at the signature for get sensor, you'll see this. It needs a plane, it needs item, and it returns a point. So if you're confused by now, it all makes sense because I've literally not explained what any of these things are. So let's start with the easiest one. A point is just two floats that is an X and a Y coordinate. But these two other ones, the plane and the item, needs a little bit more explanation. So let's go here. So what is a plane? So a plane is all the information we need to draw something at specific coordinates. So that information is the height and the width of our actual SVG. So let's say this chart, actually I'm just gonna go over because then you can see my mouse. So the height is 500 and the width is also 500 pixels. And then we need to know the range and our domain, which is the minimum and maximum value of our X and Y axis. Once we have that information, if we want to place, for example, something at X equals to 10, we can say, okay, well, that would be at pixel number 500. If it was at X equal to 5, it'd be 250, and so on. So this is like kind of the core of the whole library. It's like how the information you need to determine where anything is. So yeah. And what is an item? So an item is information about anything I rendered from your data. So for example, this scatter chart, I have a dot here. All of these dots are would be a single item. And I would collect information, okay, like what color it is, and what exact position it is, what size it is in the case of a dot, and importantly, like what data it was produced from, and lots of other details about it. And so this whole module is the interface to like get that information. So in this case, like we can get the center of this point as well. And that is super useful to, like in this case, we're just adding labels, but you can really use that to do pretty much anything. So bar labels is in fact just a wrapper around another function, which is called each bar, which maps over all your bars and and you can just draw something based on that information. So in this case, I've added this property called error to our data, which is going to be our error margin. And we're going to try to draw this line. And so for each bar, we get the top position, which is this spot. And we get the data that it was made from. That is like, so this first bar here was made from this data point, and this one was made from the second one, and so on. So when we get the bar, this one, we'll get the first data point. And then we'll use that to draw this line. And now we have like error bars. So at this point, like reality, it can be whatever you want it to be. Because all the information I have about your items and about your data is available to you. So you can just draw whatever you want. And this like concept of items is the same, that is the foundation for the interactivity API. So in this example, we can have our trusty bar chart, and to make here, we're like finding the nearest bar and showing a tooltip for it. And for that, we need to import these attributes, which is from charts.events, which are just regular attributes, except they pertain to events. So at the heart of this chart and the events, we have this line, which is the attribute that says on mouse move, we have to find the nearest bars. So it's plural because in the situation where you have two exactly the same size bars on exactly the same spot, it will give you both of them. But yeah, like once it has found the nearest bar, it sends this message on hover. And so it comes up here. And now you might notice that I called this an item, and that is not how you spell item. But there's a good explanation for that, which I'll go into now. So as we discussed before, we have this item, and it's true that each of these is an item, but it is specifically one item. And that's because you can also have several items like in a group, and that is what distinguishes like one and many. And this is useful, it's not really useful in the case of scatters because you don't really have groups of items in the same way, but in bar charts, you have many single items, like you have a bar here, you have a bar here, a bar here. But in some cases, for some interactivity stuff, it's useful to interpret this as one item as well. So that's what you'd use many for. But yeah, to come back to an example, so this is just like, this is a single item, essentially. This is like regular architecture stuff. So we keep our items in our state, and then when we get them here again, we can use them for like literally any, like just like we use them in this one. So right now I'm just, for each of them, I am making a tooltip. But if we want to add those error bars back, we can do that as well. So for each of the ones that I was hovering, I'm now adding this error bar, and there you go. Oh, the tooltip is kind of covering it. Put it somewhere else. And like that. Cool. Well, that was all I got for you today. I hope I was on time. I don't know, my timings when I was practicing at home, it was like 20 minutes long, but I don't know how I did. But yeah, thank you.
Your timing is perfectly great. Please join me in thanking Tereza. Thank you, Tereza.
Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Let's open the floor to any questions. Please feel free to jump in.
Hi, Tereza.
Hi.
Hey, so I've been using elm-charts quite extensively, so thanks. And I was just wondering, what do you think is the most problematic part of what should we be concerned about in regards to performance when you're dealing with like a huge amount of data? And yeah.
That's a good question. So I haven't actually looked a ton into performance. I do have hopes. I should like be adding more like lazy stuff in there. So I'll be doing that in a coming release as well to help out with any issues, especially if you're dealing with like a lot of data. But at some point it can be difficult with especially when you do tooltips, just because like rendering a node is so expensive. So all the other stuff is actually not that expensive. But yeah, maybe we can do a little collaboration to figure out the performance stuff if you like.
Sure, thank you.
George, how big are your data sets?
Like 10,000 points or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think also one could do tricks with like, not rendering as many nodes, or like line charts. If you do the interpolations, they're a lot cheaper because it's one node rather than doing the dots, for example. So there's probably things we could do to lower the amount of nodes. And
yeah,
I don't know if you,
yeah, we're trying to batch a lot of stuff and like cluster the data.
Yeah.
Right? But it's exactly what you said. When you're dealing with interactivity, then it starts to become a lot more troublesome.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Let's look at it together.
Tereza, did you have anything specific in mind in regard to statistics?
Just like even basic things like finding a trend through a scatter plot and stuff like that. Like I haven't focused on implementing those, and I think it sort of makes sense to keep them separate. Like this is specifically for drawing it, and then like the manipulation of what you actually want to draw is like none of my business. So yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Tereza?
I saw this really cool GIF on Twitter about Zoom.
Oh yeah.
Show us something?
Yeah, so I was very excited about that Zoom, to the point where people were like laughing at me because it's not that exciting. But yeah, I can. Do you just want to see it, or do you want to see the code for it? Okay. I am gonna share my screen again. So, it's over here actually. So it's hiding over here as well. And it looks like this. And I just think it's so fun. And like, I don't know, it was just kind of tricky to make because I had to change some internal stuff. But now, like, it can just go in and out and everything. And the code is sort of like, okay, like the key thing is like these two attributes. So you can zoom at a certain percentage, and the trick for like moving it around was that you can sort of define what the center of your chart should be. And I was just like very excited about that API. But it is there's like some event stuff to do still, so I haven't so it's still like some customization on the user side to determine exactly what reactions they want. But I'm really happy with the primitives that came out of it. Was that what you were looking for? Or
I have one more. So I was just wondering, what was the kind of like the history, because like this is such a huge package.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine like what is the process of just thinking about all of the API that you want to cover.
Oh my god. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is like such a. It's been like 5 years since I first wrote the first draft of this library. So I've gone through like so many APIs, and this is the first time I've been like remotely satisfied. It was a really big change for me when I realized this thing about items, and that you could like, because I had this issue, like, okay, like if you have a bar chart and you want to add these labels, at first I was thinking in this attribute mode, okay, like I need to have an attribute where you can add a label, but that removed the ability to determine at what layer the label should be placed at. So maybe you want your label to be like some elements down as well. So you lose the ability to control that. And so when I thought of this whole like, okay, you can just have these like abstract representations of your renders and use them after on your own accord, that was a really big break for the API, I think. So yeah, I was really happy about that. And then it tied so nicely into the interactivity stuff as well. So it was just really helpful.
Tereza, did you work with others to see how well your API sort of was tuned to their needs, or did you just try it yourself and figure out what you thought was best?
For a long time, it was like vibe based. Like, so I was just working for a company that had some charts, and like I was just trying to get to do those charts in Elm. And so it was very focused on just my personal needs at that point. But then as I was shared more library with others, like for example with George, like I talked a bunch to him about what his needs were. Actually, he was like pretty crucial in doing the interactivity API. So yeah, I like as it has grown, and like maybe like personally as well, I've like had more of like an open source mind in that I think more broadly about API needs. Before I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna do this little thing for myself, and then if people want it, they can have it. But now, like if people tell me they need certain things, I'll definitely take that into consideration. And I've tried to make it extensible and just make the API really open, such that if in such a crazy space as charts, like I cannot imagine like all the things that one could possibly do in a chart. So I've just left it really open, and like again, like just like open up for all this information that I have available. Like it'll be available to you as well to draw whatever you want. So yeah.
So
Yeah,
have
maybe-
you thought about
oh.
animations and stuff, like moving from one graph to another one? Or should
Yeah.
that be handled outside of elm-charts, in your opinion?
Yeah, actually we had an API for that like a really long time ago, but I don't really remember what happened to it. But it was sort of like several years ago. So there is like a design that I could dig up again to implement, but it was sort of half-baked as well and had some problems. I think for now, like to a large extent, it probably makes sense to separate them, but I'd definitely be open in like giving guidelines on how to do that, for example, or helpers. But there is like limits to what animations you can do with SVG without actually just like changing the data. So yeah, definitely that's on my roadmap to do the animation stuff at some point.
Thanks.
Yeah, so maybe if I can also ask a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I mean, I'm very new to this. I've not used elm-charts so much, but I'm kind of interested. Did you find some kind of fundamental thing that the chart is? I mean, what is a chart actually? I think you may have an idea after all these years of making all these different variants. And is there some useful mental model that somebody new to it could put in their head and maybe?
Yeah, so I think like as for like the totally abstract explanations of what a chart is, there's like several books about it. Exactly, Edward Tufte is there, and there are other like books on like the like elements of charts, visualizations or something. There's like another book as well that's like really classic. I admittedly have not like I've read all of Tufte's book, but I haven't read the other ones. But I think for me, at the core of it, they're still like quite limited. Like they've mostly been dealing with like basic visualizations, like the scatters and the bars, like the most common ones. But like the core of the library itself is just like this placement of items, and then like, okay, like the idea that you have range of domains and you can change that. And so this like plane is like basically the only thing that I calculate in the chart library, and it doesn't really do anything else. That's the fun part. It's just like SVG helpers and then this plane. So yeah, I don't know if I have a super good answer to that question, but I can definitely recommend those books if you want.
It helps a lot. I mean, I'm involved in a platform for the documentation of artistic research. Mm-hmm. Somehow I've ended up with something very graph-like or diagram-like somehow. And it has this grid also as a background. And I mean, we're also suffering from that because it's very different from the rest of the internet. And it causes a lot of problems, but people have found it a useful space. So, and I was wondering, I mean, I think that graphs have a relationship to that, but I'm trying to figure that out and maybe find somehow what is fundamental to this platform. But but thanks. This is insightful. Yeah.
Cool. Oh.
A question from someone asking, did you not present Elm charts?
I think I didn't.
A little while ago.
I think
at Strange Loop in St. Louis?
I think I did one at like the Elm Europe at some point. But I think I did a parser at the Strange Loop, like the Elm Conference Strange Loop. But not, I don't think I've done charts. Well, maybe I did. I don't know anymore. But yeah, something like that.
Nice one. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up there, and please join me once again in thanking Tereza for her talk. Thank you, Tereza.
Thank you.